Wrong answers only. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to Toast Hammer, the channel that jumps onto trends 3 years after they're cool. I got some figures drying behind me, but the content mill keeps a churning. So today we're going to make a tier list of the best factions in Warhammer 40k. But as you know, I don't actually care about how good anything is. After all, heck, I just started collecting Custodes in 10th edition. So, instead, we're going to take a look at the best factions in 40k for kit bashing. So get comfortable, crack open a cold one, and let's get to this tier list. Alright, well, I haven't done a tier list in the 40k universe yet, but we're going to be taking a look at every faction in 40k and seeing what is the most appropriate, most fun, most engaging to kit bash with. A couple of ground rules, first of all. Kit bash is not a proxy. These have to include some parts of the original model range to count for a kit bash, or they could be like a total, I guess they could be a total scratch build if you want to go that far, but we're not going for proxy models, 3D print options, anything like that. Second ground rule, obviously I don't collect all of these factions, so a lot of these will just be kind of vibes based, for lack of a better term. I'm not made out of money, okay? I can only experience what I've experienced and have seen what I have seen. And as always, these are just my opinions. So let's start down the line. Hold one cracked. Alright, first up, we got the homeboys themselves. I did not make this tier list. I did re-describe the tiers. We got Orc, fun and easy, challenging but rewarding. Sweaty, will superglue. Oh, there's a typo. Will superglue fingers together, and the 8th circle of hell. For how fun and or easy it is to kit bash these factions. And we're starting right off the bat with the homeboys, Adeptus Mechanicus. I've been kit bashing this army for quite some time now, and I'm here to say I'm going to put them in challenging but rewarding. I think they're a lot of fun to kit bash, and I think there are a lot of options open, but you gotta be a little bit smart about it. The thing about kit bashing Imperial models is they have to look like they make sense. And I think AdMech is one of the ones where you get the most leeway in what makes sense or doesn't, but it still kind of has to look a little bit like it makes sense, if that even makes sense. But time doesn't grow on trees, so let's move right along over here to what looks like the Blood Angels. Blood Angels are, of course, one of the Space Marine chapters. Space Marines are a weird one. And there's a lot of them here. So let's go first with just the generic Space Marines, and I think that will let me fill in the rest with a little bit more nuance. And I'm going to put normal Space Marines. I'm actually going to put them in sweaty tier, and there's this very specific reason why. Space Marines kits can be bashed with other Space Marine kits very easily. There's a lot of leeway between what shoulder pads, helmets, etc. loadout bits that you use. But to me, that is kind of just making your dudes that look like they're Space Marines into other dudes that look like other Space Marines. And they're not typically like that exciting of a kit bash. I wouldn't say they're very hard to do. I think it's just like one of the less interesting factions to kit bash. Blood Angels, I would actually put up one step above in the challenging but rewarding, because I do think there's a little bit more you can do there with Death Company. You got the whole vampire motif going on. You got some interesting stuff going on with Sanguinary Guard, the guys with abs in their armor for some reason, that you might be able to, you know, I feel like the Stormcast aesthetic works very well with Blood Angels over some other chapters. So you get some more interesting options going there, more than just the normal Space Marine. And actually, for Black Templars, I'm going to put them all the way up into fun but easy. or fun and easy, because basically you slap as many purity seals as you can on these guys, get some flowy cloaks going. I do think they're one of the more stylish and interesting aesthetic-wise chapters of Space Marines, and have the most opportunity for customization in that respect. Just leaning into the whole like Gothic Crusader side of things really helps pull these guys ahead of the standard Space Marine chapters into some more interesting kit bash, I guess, opportunity. Next up over here, looks like we got Chaos Knights. Chaos Knights being the one of the Chaos tiers, which means they're going to be pretty high up by default. You can kind of just add spikes to a lot of Chaos stuff, and that's a great kit bash, is to just make them look weirder and spikier. So I'm going to go ahead and put I think a lot of Chaos factions will be in fun and easy, as I think that you can get away with a lot in terms of just weirdness as well as availability of options. Things don't need to make as much sense with Chaos as compared to other, I think, Imperium factions, because you can, it's the warp. Anything goes. There's no rules there. So yeah, I think Chaos works really well for kit bashing. Necrons. Necrons I would typically put in Will Superglue Fingers Together, because I don't think there's a lot of options for kit bashing Necrons. A lot of their kits are very kind of singularly purposed. There's not a lot of leeway in either their mechanics or their aesthetics in order to get away with a lot of custom builds, with one exception that bumps them up, which is flayed ones. For a long time, the only way to kind of financially responsibly make flayed ones, and kind of still today the only way to financially responsibly come up with flayed ones, is to do some green stuff sculpting over their flayed skin bits, because apparently the kits are really expensive and you don't get that many guys. So I will bump them up to sweaty tier, if only for the flayed one effect. I also do think there's potential, like in the Mechanicum video game, to do a flayed one Overlord or Scorpec Lord or something like that. I think that would be rad as hell. It's probably been done online and I just haven't seen it, but that entire kind of flayed one flavor of Necrons boosts those guys up to sweaty tier for me. Chaos Space Marines, much like Chaos Knights, they're fun and easy. Add some spikes to some dudes, get some weird tentacle things going. Hey, you got a kit bash. Enough said. Custodes, my newest project. In between sweaty and Will Superglue Fingers Together for this one. I don't think these guys are going to be easy to kit bash. Scratch bashing, there's not a whole lot of options that fit in with their aesthetic. They have a very specific thing going on, and that specific thing has a lot of detail. I'm going to put these guys in Superglue Fingers Together, but I think I'm optimistically hoping that they will be sweaty tier. Dark Angels are almost on, I think, Black Templars tier in terms of kit bashing, but I'm going to put them down to be equal to Blood Angels, that I think they have about similar deviation from the normal Space Marines for me. Yeah, there's not a whole lot that can be said about them. They got cloaks, and sometimes they have different paint schemes. That's about it. Drukhari are again going in the fun and easy. I would say, having never collected Drukhari themselves, they're forced to kit bash a lot of things because like almost half their range is just not produced by Games Workshop anymore, even though they have rules in the book for it. So they literally have to learn how to kit bash those things. But also because of their whole space pirate aesthetic, I do think it is a nice faction to kit bash. Like Chaos, you can add spikes to a lot of things and get away with a bunch of stuff. And also, they're just kind of overall bad dudes, and you can get away with a lot of fantasy models that fit within that aesthetic as well. Chaos Demons. Now, at first, you might think these are Orc tier, because literally anything can be this D6 can be a demon. That would wait. That's actually a really good idea. Have a D6 that's all ones as your greater demon. Really kind of insane meta commentary there. But I'm actually going to put them over in sweaty tier, since I think to get good looking demons, you need a lot of sort of custom sculpting. What we're talking about with demons is typically a lot of organic shapes, a lot of flesh and sinew and joints and things of that nature, which means typically a lot of green stuff, milliput, or the sculpting material of your choice. Not saying that sculpting is more hard than normal kit bashing, but it is a very different and specific skill set, and I think it deserves to be in sweaty tier because of that. Death Guard. Much like Chaos Space Marines, they can get away with a lot, but I want to say even more than normal, so I'm actually going to put them in the first Orc tier of the game. And if you don't know what Orc tier means, well, we're going to get to Orcs eventually, and that should explain that. But Death Guard, they look super weird already, and adding more weirdness to them is pretty easy to do. They have a large range of bits between the Maggot Kin of Nurgle, fantasy range, and their own range, swapping bits around, as well as custom sculpting opportunities. You can really go pretty wild with Death Guard conversions, at least from what I've seen online. I don't know what this faction is. Is it Death Guard? I think this is Death Guard. It's definitely a Space Marine. And if it's Death Guard, I think they're just about the same as normal Space Marines. They're very kind of standard looking in terms of what Space Marines are. Eldari. This is maybe a controversial take. A lot of their models are really old and potentially need kit bashing, but I think Eldari are actually really difficult to kit bash. So I'm going to put them into Will Superglue Fingers together for the very specific reason that a lot of their forms are very swoopy and curvy, and those are not easy shapes to kit bash. You want irregular angles, you want spikes, you want greeblies. And these are all things that really the Eldar don't have access to in terms of alternate accessories for their models. I almost never see Eldar being kit bashed online, and that might just be the bias of my personal experience, but I really don't think that these guys take well to people who are interested in kit bashing. It's like we got Grey Knights. I'm going to put them in challenging but rewarding. They do have a unique aesthetic, and they do need it, because all of their dudes are puny little tiny men who need to be upgraded to Primaris size. So I do think they really actually have a lot to gain from people who are into kit bashing, and I do think that that can be very rewarding to have a fully kit bashed or converted Primaris scale Grey Knight army. Here's another army of mine, Gene Stealer Cults. I think that they are in Will Superglue Fingers together. There's some opportunity out there for things like Brood Brothers if you want to do the more Imperial Guard route. That I don't really consider that kit bashing though, because it's kind of just buying other GW models to put in the army. But there are some other kit bashing opportunities for this faction, which I will be getting to in the next month or so. So keep your eyes peeled for more details on that. But overall, I do think this faction is somewhat limited by its model range and by its concept, in that they're kind of normal dudes, and GW doesn't have a lot of model support for that. And although there are proxy options available, they are still somewhat. Imperial Guard. I'm going to put them in not quite fun and easy, because they need some more work, but challenging but rewarding. There's so many Imperial Guards factions that are strictly not supported by GW anymore, and there's so many passionate Imperial Guard players who are really into kit bashing those factions, and it's super cool to see. Armageddon Steel Legion, Adelan Rough Riders, things of that nature. We see these really passionate players come out and have these awesome conversions. None of them look easy, especially when you're a horde army. So I do think it's a very challenging thing to do, but I do think when you have one of those specialist factions fully on the tabletop, they look pretty incredible. Imperial Knights, unlike Chaos, I think is in sweaty tier, maybe all the way down to 8th Circle of Hell. And I think I am going to actually put them there just because it's really hard to find actual opportunities to kit bash them with. There's not many models in the range, and there's even less kind of data sheets around to support them. So to make something that's not using GW parts, or that is using multiple different GW kits, and still make them Imperial Knights is, I think, like nearly impossible. You can have, of course, like zhuzhed up knights, over on Tabletop Time, they did the Sororitas Knight and things of that nature. You can make knights very fancy, but there's very little reason to do so out of, like game mechanics speaking. And I do think that the knights are also just cool enough. They don't really need to, unless you have a very specific goal in mind. But also just the lack of model support at 4 units of knight scale makes these things really tough to convert well, I think. Okay, Tyranids. Tyranids, I'm going to put them in fun and easy. They need a lot of sculpting, but they're pretty posable. You can change the poses pretty easily. And with the kind of structure of their organics, I think the sculpting is more forgiving than something like Chaos Demons. They have a lot more of like bony connections and a lot less fleshy stuff compared to Demons. For some reason, I don't know why that's the aesthetic, but it is. So I do think it's a little bit easier than Demons to actually kit bash Tyranids. I do think there's a lot of opportunity with Tyranids specifically being a rapidly adapting and evolving organism. It just fits in with their flavor really well. Although arguably it does for Demons too. Again, hey, wrong opinions only. And finally we get to Orcs, who are in Orc tier. It is impossible to kit bash something that looks bad for Orcs. It's literally, you cannot be a kit basher and do an Orc thing and have it look bad. It doesn't need to make sense, because Orc things inherently don't make sense. There's 5 billion bits around, from children's toys to just pieces of plastic card to like clay and sculpting materials. Literally, the world is your sandbox when it comes to kit bashing Orcs. And it's both easy and always looks amazing when people do. Sororitas, I also think, are in the 8th layer of hell when it comes to kit bashing. Their aesthetic is very, very specific. And I think they don't have a lot of model support for things outside of that very, very specific aesthetic that enable their ability to kit bash. You know, for AdMech, you can kind of just find random technological bits and bobs from different model ranges and model kits. There are very few things that are specifically nuns with guns. So, you know, there's kind of a corner on the market of that aesthetic in the Sororitas range. And I suppose there's like maybe some overlap with, you know, some of the women Stormcast and things like that. But even that, I think, is like a little bit of a scale problem. So I do think the Sororitas are a very difficult faction to get kit bashing right with. And actually, because of that, I'm going to move Knights up, because I do think Sororitas is a lot harder to nail than Knights. All right. Space Wolves. I know a couple of Space Wolves players, and they both are super into kit bashing, because Space Wolves kind of need to be into kit bashing because they don't have, again, a lot of model support. They have a lot of really, really old kits that really need refreshes and aren't going to be getting them. So they need to be relying on kit bashes and custom sculpting to really make their models shine. And I do think Space Wolves do have one of those very unique aesthetics like Black Templars to enable those kit bashes. It's very easy to sculpt a fur pelt as opposed to, for example, a full arm and claw that you would need for like a Chaos Demon or something like that. And a lot of small details can be added to Space Wolves to really make them more Space Wolfy, as opposed to like the more like Ultramarines or normal Space Marine chapters. Tau is another one that I think is the 8th Circle of Hell. They have a very specific aesthetic. That aesthetic is Gundam. Could you just get a Gundam model and use it as Tau Super Heavy battlesuit? Maybe. I don't know. But again, this isn't about proxies. I do think it's very hard to find custom kit bashable components that would fit in with Tau. There is one very specific exception to that, which is their Auxilia, which is like the other Xeno races that are part of the Tau. And like, yeah, there's a lot of potential there for people to expand outside of things, but that gets into some very, very heavy custom sculpting. Like, again, citing Tabletop Time, Dave has done with some of his Tau models, and doing that for a bunch of troops just seems to be not really worth it. And kit bashing battle suits, I think I've almost never seen outside of adding like a couple of bits or bobs here or there. So I do think these guys are really tough, in fact, to actually kit bash. Thousand Suns, they have some models. These last three are all really hurting in their model ranges. I do think Thousand Suns gets a little bit better in the sweaty tier, because they do have that access to chaos. They do have a very specific aesthetic, but not one that I think is easy to replicate. So much trim, so much detail in all of their models. So if you're not doing demons for Thousand Suns and you're trying to do like the actual rubric designs on things, I think you're going to have a really hard time with it. However, the need to do it is definitely there because their model range is relatively unsupported compared to some of the other Chaos factions. Leagues of Votan, definitely an 8th Circle of Hell. In fact, I'm going to put Tau up to Superglue Fingers together and put Votan along with Sororitas. Very little is known about their aesthetic, and there's so little that even resembles it. The closest thing I can think of are Castellan robots and like the Custodes grav tanks, because those are also kind of, you know, pre-Dark Age of technology in the lore and what they're supposed to represent. That's all, and neither of those have a unit like those. You can't put those in Votan because Votan don't have the units to support a large robot or a big tank. They just, they don't have the model support to do anything. And they don't have the lore support to do it either, being so brand new. They don't even have like a book yet, man. They don't have any fiction associated with them. So it's really hard to put them anywhere but bottom tier for here. At least for now. That might expand greatly, opening up in the future. And last but not least, we got World Eaters. World Eaters is a tough one, because their codex is missing a bunch of units that they should have. They should have their own Terminators, and they should, like, I think they're called the Red Butchers, and they should have about half or twice as many models that they currently do that, like, Chaos Space Marines has access to a lot of, but they don't for some reason. I'm going to put them in sweaty tier. I think it's a hard aesthetic to match. I think it's about as tough to match with Thousand Suns, and the lack of model support in the data sheets means that there's way less reason to do it. But if they do open up support for Red Butchers and other more kind of World Eaters specific stuff like Votan, I do think that they could raise on the ranks in the future. But this, let's see if there's anything we want to switch around here. I could see putting Tyranids down to challenging but rewarding just because of the amount of custom sculpting that is required to make them look good. But otherwise, I think I'm pretty happy with how this tier list is looking. We got a nice bell curve distribution, which is typically what you want from situations like this. But let me know, how many bad takes do I have? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this kind of fun distraction with the video, be sure to throw it a like. It always helps the channel out. And as always, if you want to see some more cool kit bashes, some more memes, some more lore. Be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single video. And until next time, peace.